The words came out like a blade. "You're fired." They hung in the air sharp enough to cut through the clatter of dishes and murmurs of conversation. Emily Carter froze, a chipped coffee mug still warm in her hand, as her world tilted off balance inside the Granby Street Diner in Norfolk, Virginia. She had worked there for 6 years, long enough to know the smell of bacon grease that never left the walls and the rhythm of forks striking thick plates, long enough to memorize how regulars liked their toast. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the rent and gave her life a steady beat. That morning had started like any other until a stranger limped through the squeaky glass door and set off a chain of events no one would forget. He was tall, broad-shouldered, but his steps were uneven, each one carried on the support of a cane. In his free hand, a tray with scrambled eggs trembled precariously. A scar slipped from beneath his collar, and his left pant leg was folded neatly where it ended above the knee. That was Sergeant Mason Holt, a Marine who had lived battles most people only glimpsed on TV before moving on with their day. No uniform, now just jeans and a worn jacket, but his presence carried the unmistakable weight of discipline and hardship. Emily saw the struggle before anyone else did. She hurried out from behind the counter, voice steady with the practiced calm of someone used to putting strangers at ease. "Let me help you with that," she said. Mason gave a half-smile, shaking his head. "I've carried worse," he muttered. But the tray tilted again, coffee threatening to spill. Emily didn't hesitate. She slipped it from his grip, steadied the cup, and guided him to an empty booth near the window. "We don't need scrambled eggs decorating the floor today," she teased lightly. Mason chuckled, easing himself into the seat with a sigh. "Thank you. Not a problem," she smiled, already pouring him fresh coffee without asking. For her, it was no thing as simple kindness her mother would have expected of her. But behind the counter, her manager, Victor Lane, was watching with narrowed eyes. For 3 years he had ruled the diner like it was his private kingdom. He barked at staff if their shirts weren't tucked in, berated them if an order took too long, and above all, he demanded profit over people. And to him, Emily's gesture was a waste. Mason wasn't spending money there. She was neglecting real customers to play caretaker for a man Victor saw as worthless to his bottom line. Emily didn't notice his glare. She chatted softly with Mason about the cold weather, slipped him an extra slice of toast, something she'd learned veterans always appreciated. Mason thanked her quietly, his gravelly voice carrying the weight of commands once shouted across deserts. Across the room, Victor snapped. He strode toward her, shoes squeaking on linoleum, his voice loud enough to silence the construction workers joking in the corner. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he barked. Emily blinked. "Helping a customer." "He's not a customer." Victor jabbed a finger toward Mason. "He brought food in here. You've got paying tables waiting, and you're running around like his nurse." The diner went still. Conversations died. Even the sizzle from the grill seemed to fade. Mason straightened in the booth, his cane tapping once against the floor. "I didn't ask her to help," he said evenly. Victor sneered. "And you should have declined. This is a business, not a charity." Emily's hands trembled, but she clenched her fists. It took 30 seconds. "If that's too expensive for you, maybe you're in the wrong business." Victor's face flushed red. His voice rose. "That's it. You're done. Grab your things, you're fired." The word landed like a slap. Emily stood frozen, shame and anger colliding inside her chest. Customers stared. Phones began to lift, recording. Mason rose slowly, leaning heavily on his cane. His voice carried the authority of a man who had commanded men under fire. "You're really firing her for helping me?" Victor snarled. "She works for me, or she used to. This doesn't concern you." But Mason's steady gaze said otherwise. Without fanfare, he pulled out his phone and tapped out a short message. He didn't raise his voice, didn't threaten. He simply sent it. A ripple of unease passed through the room. Minutes later, the squeaky door opened again. 2 men in crisp marine dress blues stepped inside, posture straight as steel. One, Captain Elias Ramirez, strode to Mason's booth, clapping a hand on his shoulder. "Sarge, knew you'd come," Mason replied. Ramirez turned to Emily. "You're the one who helped him?" She nodded, stunned. Corporal Trent Maddox crossed his arms. "And you got fired for it?" Victor forced a laugh. "She wasn't doing her job. This is my business." Ramirez's eyes narrowed. "Management is one thing. Disrespect is another. You humiliated her for showing humanity to a veteran." Phones lifted higher, live streams ticking upward. A teenager near the door smirked. "You're already viral, man. 20,000 watching." Victor faltered, his bravado cracking. But still he barked, "You can't hijack my diner. She's gone. That's final." Mason's voice cut through like steel. Final is the internet. Final is the story already leaving this room. You made her an example. Now you're the example. The crowd outside thickened as word spread. Locals peered through windows, chanting one word that rattled the glass. Respect. Respect. News cameras appeared. Reporters shoved microphones forward. "Sir," one called, "why did you fire a waitress for helping a disabled Marine?" Victor's face drained of color. Emily's chest tightened. She hadn't asked for this storm, but here it was, roaring around her. And when the mic swung her way, she found her voice. It shook at first, but then steadied. "I don't regret helping him. Not for a second. If kindness is a fireable offense, maybe the problem isn't me." The diner erupted in applause. Outside, the chant grew louder. Emily's humiliation twisted into something unexpected hope. Offers poured in. A nurse in scrubs pressed her hand, saying the hospital needed aides. A construction worker slipped her a card for his brother's diner. A young mother promised a fundraiser for her rent if she needed it. Strangers who had witnessed her fall now reached to lift her higher. Mason leaned close, his voice low but steady. "Jobs come and go. Character stays. Today you showed yours." Emily's eyes brimmed with tears, not from shame anymore, but from the flood of support. She stood taller than she had in years. Outside, the crowd chanted her name, not as a waitress, but as a symbol. A reminder that decency still mattered, that compassion was worth defending. Victor Lane, once so loud and untouchable, shrank into the shadows of his own diner, powerless. What began as a routine shift for Emily Carter had turned into a turning point, not just for her, but for everyone watching. A reminder that one act of kindness, no matter how small, can ripple outward until the world is forced to take notice.